What's going on out there, everybody? Happy New Year. Welcome to another edition of Pilot Light Media. Today we've got a really cool build. We've got 3 mini terrariums here. This is one of the jars, and here are 2 more. This is from some fancy mustard. Again, we love to use food and beverage containers for different kinds of builds. We've done that on the channel before. It's a great and economical way to find some unique pieces, different shapes, sizes, and things. So that's what we're going to use today. And again, we're going to do just 3 identical builds. And we're really excited about it. So first, we're going to go ahead and take these plastic caps off. Get them off to the side, and let's take a look at our materials. For the drainage layer, we have our river rock pebbles, a large variety. We're also going to be using some of those for the hardscape itself. If you go ahead and get it wet, you'll see that it's quite a different color. Much shinier and much more exciting. There you go. The substrate itself is our typical blend. Got that on board. And as far as the plants, we've got some fern moss, some pilea, that will be the star of the show, and some thread moss that we're taking from a previous build. This is our pickle jar moss farm. So again, another old food and beverage container build that we made. This is really just used to propagate a couple different kinds of moss. As you can see, it works well, but we've been picking at it. And that's what we're going to use for our thread moss. So we've got that. Also for our hardscape, we've got some small pieces of mulberry, and for our timber, we also have some small pieces right here. And I believe this is oak wood. So there we go. First, what we did with the food and beverage containers, you want to get the label off. We had already soaked these. Usually just want to soak them in hot water. That will get the labels off, all or most of it, especially the paper part. If you still have adhesive on there, the best thing to do is get a little bit of rubbing alcohol and a rag. Spray the rag and then just wipe the outsides. So they work well. You just want to make sure that you clean them up well on the inside and the outside. There's a little bit here. Sometimes you may have to let the solvent sit for a minute. And we also just like to give the glass one complete wipe too, to kind of clean up any smudges or anything like that. These labels came off really, really well, so we don't have to scrape too much. But you can also use a small razor scraper too. You just want to be careful not to scratch the glass. Something like this, you want to use, just make sure your blade is sharp. This is a used blade, but we know that it is sharp. So any pieces can come off that way too. And then once you're done with that, you can get started on the build. So the first thing we want to do is cut our fiber mesh screen for the drainage layer. So we'll do that first. And you want to cut that just a little bigger than the container itself so that you get a tight seal and that the substrate does not fall through. So what we do is take a piece like that, just kind of lay it on there, and then cut as best you can. Get close. And then you can always cut the shape once you are done. And again, this is kind of a tedious step in the process, but it's very, very important. So, if you have an X-Acto knife or a razor and you're working on a surface that you can cut on, that's a real good way to do it too. Again, you just want to make sure it's sharp so that your screen doesn't drag and rip as you try to cut. But on this surface, that doesn't really work as well. So we're just doing it with the scissors, which is a little more tedious, but instead it still works. And we do include this in all of our videos because it is such a critical step. And fiber mesh screen is usually the thing that works the best. You can use thin plastic, but this stuff is cheap. It's very easy to cut. It's dark in color, so it sort of disappears in the build, which is what you want, because this is just for practicality, not for effect. So now we're getting that shape. These are nice circles, which are a little easier to cut, but if some bottles might be oval or a strange shape, those take a little more time to do. But this is going to look fantastic. Two, and then finally the last one. And there we go. Now we want to add our drainage layer. And you usually want about an inch worth. With the smaller containers, that's a little trickier because you don't always have a lot of room, and you don't want to, use up a lot of that valuable room with all of your structure. You need to let some of the room there for the plants to grow. So, but in this instance, we're only using moss, and we're doing that on purpose because it doesn't have an elaborate root structure, so it does not need a lot of substrate to grow on. So first we'll get that drainage layer going. And again, let's move our screen there. We'll get these set up. So, like I said, you typically want about an inch, but because these are such smaller containers, we don't want to use up all that room. And we really won't need to, because we're only planting moss, and it just won't need a lot of space for any kind of root system. In fact, most moss, or I think technically all moss, doesn't have roots. So it just has like Velcro, like hook and loop ways to grab onto the substrate, but it gets all of its nutrients through water. So roots are actually fairly advanced. There's a lot of primitive plants that haven't developed roots, so they have to get all of their nutrients through water, like eophytes, bromeliads, things like that. A lot of fern and moss fall into that same category. So that is the reason why they don't have a fancy root system. They really don't need it. So here we go. That's going to be just enough to have a small water table. Again, that's not an inch, but that's okay. There's some gaps in this one. We want to fill that in. Some smaller ones, some smaller rocks. And always give it a good shake so they sit in there flat. And just like that. And then you lay your screen in. And you can use your finger or you can use a poker, whichever is easier. With these jars, it's a nice wide mouth so you can get your hand in. But we always have something like this around one of our tables, just makes things easier. And you just want to get them to lay as flat as possible. Once you get the substrate in there and the plants and you push down on everything, it will tend to take on a flatter shape. So again, that'll be the look that you want. They're in there maybe just a little bigger than the size of the jar, so that you get a tight seal all around. And for our hardscape, we do want to pick out a couple smaller stones. There is really some cool pieces of quartz in here. The white ones will show up better against the green, the dark green plants, and the soil. So we'll go ahead and pick out a number of smaller white, light brown colored stones. This is, again, that's quartz that we can use as the hardscape. And it'll look great too, because it'll match our drainage layer. You don't always need to do that, but because it's a small viewing area, we think it'll look cool. So for now, those are the stones we're going to pick out. And we'll see if we can change our mind too later. So let's fill them. Let's get about there. And we'll push that down a bit. Once it gets wet, it'll lay flatter and it'll be a little more workable, similar to mud and clay. So now we'll get our water table started. Usually like to do this with a spray bottle. Kind of push the water in there and mush it down a little bit. And then when you look at the bottom, you want to see just a little bit of standing water in there. We don't quite have it. That looks good for now. And we'll do the second one. Same thing. Spray bottle too kind of helps push the water down there. And you want a little bit of standing water, let that drain down. And the last one. And it always takes a little while for the substrate to soak up the water as well as for everything to drain through. So here you can see, oh yeah, actually in here we've got way too much water, which can happen sometimes too, as well as that one. This one's about right, but we'll just pour a little out. And so that way at least you know everything is saturated. And if you look, when you build, you wiggle it around a little bit. If you see a little bit of water at the bottom, that's about perfect. Same thing here. You put a little bit too much in. And just pour that out. And the sphagnum moss and the substrate will soak up a lot of that water too, in the coming in the next time, in the couple days, as everything gets acclimated and established. So there you go. That is the basic foundation of the build. Again, that's a lot of the busy work. Not always the most exciting thing, but an important step. And there you see it, little by little, so you understand what we're doing. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is plant our fern moss. And what we want that to look like is a lush forest floor, or jungle floor. So we're going to completely cover the bottom of each build with that moss. So you want to break it up into smaller pieces and carefully kind of make it the shape of your container. In this instance, it's round. So we're just going to kind of gently push together a piece to make it more or less round. And lay it in there. And gently push it down. And as it grows in, the leaves and things like that will push themselves up and it'll get a little better shape. It'll take on more of a natural shape. And that is what you are left with. So as you can see, the fern moss more or less covers the entire bottom all three builds. It's just a little dark. That one as well. Now what we're going to do is bring in our thread moss, just a couple small sprigs. The thread moss will grow across the glass. It will stick to the glass and the moisture, the condensation, just like that. So we'll push it toward the edge. And it's just going to be one small sprig per build here. Just enough to get that species going. So just kind of a real small piece like that. And then just put it toward the back, toward one edge of the build. And you want to work it into this to the substrate just a little bit, but it will grab onto what it needs to as it establishes itself. So again, it doesn't really have traditional roots that you want to work down into the soil, but you want to make sure that it's pushed in enough so that it can attach itself. Okay, and there we go. And then for the final planting, let's get our pilea in there. And here you want to be careful to clean these roots off as best you can. You can soak them, you can spray them, or you can gently brush them. You just want to be very careful. You want to try to get a lot of that old substrate off, but a little bit of it is okay. So we want to try to kind of get 3 stalks that are more or less the same size. And there we go, there's your 1, 2, 3. But we have some extra. We want to plant it evenly, so hopefully I have 6. So 2 in each, and we do. 1, 2, and 3. That was a little delicate, but pilea is a fairly durable plant. I'm sure it will make it. Then what you do is you just take your 2 or 3 stalks together, kind of push them together as if it was one plant, and grab it. And then we're just going to stick that right in the middle down into the substrate as best we can. So it's almost like a central tree. And again, these are awfully small containers, but it is meant to show that you can build these in all kinds of different things. And the principles are all the same as long as you have your substrate, your drainage layer, some kind of a water cycle, things will grow. And the last one, it's right in here. And from a top-down view, that's about what it looks like. And again, things are a little bit mushed because everything is freshly planted. So you will have to be patient and give the plants a little bit of time to establish their roots, to kind of right themselves. And then once they are in front of their new light source, they will stretch and grow and reach toward the light, so that you can kind of manage the shape and pattern of the growth that way. So now we're going to put in a few more of our stones. We can see that we definitely want to use some smaller pieces. You want to preserve that scale. You don't want to put anything too large in there. That would also take up room for your, for the moss to grow. And we said we wanted to stick with the light colors. We said that'll show off better. And I want to try to keep things as even as we can. So we're going to pick the same basic color and shape of the rocks here. And again, I'm just going toward the light colors. And I do like the look of the quartz. because when that gets wet and when the light hits it, it does have a little bit of a translucent to it. You can kind of see in it or through it. And again, I'm just go ahead and looking at our gravel and picking out the smallest pieces. Looking just for shapes and colors that I like, sticking with something light. And I've got about 1, 2, 3, 4 pebbles per build. Some white. There we go. Get rid of the darker one and the lighter one. So there we go. And again, we're going to place them, we want them to kind of be right around the middle, sort of surrounding that stalk of pilea. That one kind of rolled out. I think for now, I was going to stay with 3 because there's really just not a lot of room, but I like that look. We'll go with all 4. So just stick them kind of a couple there toward the front and one right next to it. Here again, we'll take that largest one and put it in the middle, and then take the smaller ones and stick them toward the front. I do like that look. There, there, and then finally this one. Drop the biggest one toward the middle, and these smaller ones on the edge. And there you go, starting to take shape. And then finally, for some texture, we're going to add, we have our oak sticks and some mulberries. And again, we want to keep things small and preserve that sense of scale. So let's take a look at them and really just pick out our smallest ones. We'll do 2 per container. 1, 2, 1, 2. And just kind of drop them in toward the front. So that you can't see them. And it adds a little bit of texture. These are awfully small containers. This is about as small as a container as I would like to build something in, but it can be done. And it's fun to use a different sense of scale and challenge yourself a little bit and see what can be done in limited spaces. And then we'll just add 1 small piece of timber. Again, we've got these 2 small sticks, and then we'll take the pieces that are yet even smaller still. So I like this one. I'm going to stick 2 pieces in there to give it that fallen timber look. And as it grows, the moss will grow in and on and around these pieces of wood. So they will all the more become part of the scape itself. That one looks good. And so there you have it. And we want to clean up the glass a little bit. The glass has some of the dirt kind of sticking up, and there's some moisture, but so that you can take a good look at it. There you go. Looks great. Here's another small one. Now this one, the pilea got pushed off to the side a little bit, but rather than really try to adjust it because it is so delicate and new, I know that it will work itself in the middle. For now, I'm going to go ahead and just leave that. When we do a little bit of maintenance, the first set of maintenance tasks we do, we can adjust things because this is a new build, so you'll still want to manipulate it a little bit. And then that one is what it looks like from the top. And then finally for our covers, we like to use different types of things. Covers from all kinds of different bottles that can be made out of like aluminum or glass or metal or wood. Also cork is always great, but sometimes it's hard to find something that'll match. Also, these caps we know are at least threaded accordingly. So we're going to use them and then just cover them up. because they are just red plastic, and we'd like to use, take a look at something a little bit more exciting. We try to stick with natural materials as much as we can. Like I said, typically cork or wood, but that doesn't always work. So at least for now, we're going to do it this way. And the lids are something that can always be changed. If you don't like the look or you change your mind, you can swap out the different lid or cover without it making it that big of without it being that big of a deal. The simple, cheap thing we like to do with caps like this is to just cover them with cloth. You can use any kind of cloth that you like. Burlap is another thing that would look natural, but you can take, rags or pieces of clothing or just decorative cloth. This is a piece of blue tie-dye material we have had for a long time. That's what we're going to use for the covers. So what we'll do is we'll cut it in that shape. We're going to make 3, of course. And then you just seal them, and we'll show you what we do next. So here, this material has a little bit of an odd edge. We're going to take that off so that it matches. We'll just get rid of that right away. And then you want the cover to be just a little bigger than the lid itself, and you can always trim it. So back this up so we can see better. It's about like that. You just want to kind of fold it in on itself. So about there. So basically what we're doing is you'll put the lid on, take the cloth, cover it, and then kind of tie it off. But we want to get a smaller piece, and you do want to make it round, whereas this is square. You don't want hard edges, so you do want to cut all of that off. And we kind of like the rough cut look, so we will leave the threads randomly sort of just hanging, because we just, we like that unfinished look. So you just want to make sure that it will wrap it completely. And you can do this one of 2 ways. You can cut it all perfectly now, if you know how, or you can make it a little bigger than you think you need, stick it on there, and then trim it later, which is what we're going to do. So we'll cut 3 rough pieces. Two, and then 3. Okay, that's our scrap. 1, 2, 3. And then we want to bind them. You can use rubber bands or hair ties are likely the easiest, but you can use string or twine or wire. Rubber bands tend to kind of dry out and snap on you. Hair ties tend to be a little more durable. And you just clamp them on like that. And of course you want to make sure that you're not covering, the plants, blocking any kind of light as best you can. So we'll get them on there, and then we can just trim it up. So there we can really see it coming together, and you can see how these jars have come a long way since their days with mustard. So you can really be creative and use a lot of different things. Drop that lid on there. Try to keep it as center as you can. Push it in there and trim away. And again, this kind of thing just makes it accessible. We almost all of us already have access to different pieces of material or food jars or things like that. You don't always need to go rush out and buy things to make something awesome. Especially getting started and deciding what you really like to do and what you don't like to do, and the look that you want to achieve, the plants that you like, the level of time you have to put into maintenance, and all of those decisions. And again, we're making a lot of different cuts to this and, really kind of getting those threads of the material out, but we like that look. So that's the other reason why we're doing it like this. If you want a more of a perfect seam, you can cut, a perfect circle to size ahead of time and then put it on there. But again, we like the look, and this is also just practical way to get that good size. So in doing this a number of times, we've decided to just put them on there and trim. And just kind of remove the straight edges so that it's evenly ragged. It gives a little bit of character. And there we go. We'll see. We can make some adjustments, but that is where we're at. 3 mini terrariums out of former mustard jars. Great for the holidays. So, take a good look. And that's what we got. And as the plants grow and fill in, you'll be able to see the green a little better. And if you do use hair ties, you do have that little piece of metal. You can always just keep that toward the back, or you could get ambitious and you could paint that, or it's glue something to it, or in some other way kind of cover that. But for our instances, we're just going to keep it toward the back. And number 3 is this one. And again, the plants will, pick up a better shape as time goes on. It'll be really fun to watch these grow in and to see that. So thank you so much for tuning in. Happy New Year. We really appreciate you checking us out. Please do like and subscribe. Email us. Let us know what you like on the channel, what you don't, what you'd like to see more of, where you're getting in our information. And stay tuned, and let's have a good time and learn a lot, bring nature home in 2025. So thanks again, and keep it tuned in. Like and subscribe here to Pilot Light Media.